Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the JCG webinar series. I'm Vince Roberge with Johnson Consulting Group. Our guest today is Nate Watson, who is a Senior Account Manager at BelaPay. BelaPay is an ethical and fair-priced merchant processor based in Scottsdale, Arizona. Nate, thanks a lot for being with us today to learn about zero-cost credit card fees.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
It's great to have you. As our attendees start to filter in here, I'd like to just take a moment to thank everyone for joining us and also to let everyone know that as we go through our content and information today, to please feel free to type in questions in the chat box. We'll be looking at the chat box, trying to monitor that as we go through today. We're also going to take some time at the end of our discussion to address any questions that arise during our webinar today. So Nate, to start out, we're talking today about credit card processing, and we have a lot of funeral home and cemetery owners, managers, and operators on the call today. We need to probably start with the basics about traditional credit card processing. Can you walk us through some of the basics of what traditional credit card processing looks like?
Absolutely. So with normal traditional credit card processing that any merchant out there is essentially given when they sign up for services, they're set up with what they call an Interchange Plus service, which for anybody that doesn't understand what that means, Interchange is the major card brands, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. And Interchange is their cost of what they actually charge per card. Now, each card can fall into one of about 500 different categories that each major card brand has. And with that, they can be charged anywhere between 2% all the way up to 30% and $3 a transaction. And so it really can vary from card to card, and very much so vary in a lot of different price range on what the merchant will actually be charged based off of whatever type of card it is and what category it falls into. Now, the plus side of what Interchange is what the merchant processor itself makes, essentially what our job here would be. However, they call it a discount rate. And so a lot of people think of that as, well, they're discounting this much off my bill. And that's not necessarily true either, because that discount rate is how that merchant processor makes money. And so that's what Interchange Plus is as a whole.
And for those of us who aren't familiar, are those interchange fees different for processing a credit card in person versus processing remotely a credit card, say over the phone or over a website?
Absolutely. Those card percentages, essentially, they change based off of what the type of card that it is, if it's a non-qualified transaction or essentially a higher non-tiered qualified transaction. But it all falls under that same interchange categorization that based off of whatever type of card it is. If it's non-qualified, essentially either via internet or over the phone, they get charged more, of course. But those are, people don't really see that a lot unless you actually really kind of know the ins and outs, which from my understanding, working with a lot of the funeral homes that we have, a lot of you guys do understand what that means to your business and how much more you guys can actually lose.
Yeah, as in talking to funeral home owners and operators around the country and seeing financial statements for funeral homes and cemeteries on a pretty regular basis here at Johnson Consulting Group, I think one of the big ripple effects of COVID on funeral home and cemetery operations has been the increase in operating expense in the category of credit card processing fees. And we all in this cemetery and funeral world understand that as a result of doing remote arrangements. And I think for many funeral home owners and operators, it's been accepted as a cost of doing business. And what we'll get into a little bit further today is just questioning that a little bit and understanding the different options that exist. And one that you're planning on talking about a little bit here and that is surcharging, right? Can you walk us through a little bit about what a surcharge program is and how it's different from traditional credit card processing?
Absolutely. A surcharge platform, I'm sure a lot of you out there have actually seen this program used, but not really in the most forward or legal form of doing so. And I say that because a lot of times at little mom and pop convenience stores, even some of the gas stations across the United States, they're charging you a certain fee or percentage anytime that you run a credit card. And that is essentially what a surcharge is. Now, with our services and the way that we go about it, we actually do it all the proper way. With doing surcharge, you actually have to notify the major card brands that you're doing so, especially being that this is still such a new process and the way that it actually works. Without notifying them, you can actually be fined for the surcharge if you're actually doing that even right now. I've actually recently, in the past couple of weeks, talked to a couple of representatives from different types of businesses, not just funeral homes, but restaurants and the like, catering businesses even that have been included in this that didn't notify the card brands, and they were fined up to $50,000 for the cost of doing surcharge because they weren't notified. They didn't notify the major card brands to begin with. So with ours and the way that we do it, ours is never changed. The pricing for ours doesn't change. You can't surcharge on a debit card. That's actually still illegal. It's only able to surcharge on a cost of a credit card because essentially with paying traditionally, you're paying for somebody else to be rewarded, as 90% of the credit cards in circulation today have some kind of reward feature to them, whether it be cash back, points, or miles. And if they have all three, those rates that you guys are paying as merchants go up way higher than just a normal average everyday run-of-the-mill secured credit card. And with the surcharge program we have in place, when you guys run the cost of a credit card, instead of you as a business paying for it or merchant paying for it, the customer pays for it, and that's what a surcharge is. And our rate for that hasn't changed since we started doing this program. And it's always the same rate, and it won't change like it can for you as a business for the customer, and always stays at 3.5%.
So when you say, Nate, that surcharging as a local business, if you're placing a fee on top of a credit card transaction and passing that along to a consumer, a client family, without notifying the credit card companies, that is not legal, and people or merchants could stand to pay a fine for that?
Absolutely. I've actually heard of it even when I first started doing this program specifically. It was a big deal, and a lot of merchants were swayed away from doing this program because in the past they had been fined, or they had friends that had businesses that had been fined for doing so. But it's all because they just didn't make one quick notification to the major card brands about it, or the process of wanting to do so. And so with our services, when you sign up, we notify the major card brands on your behalf to let them know that you guys will be surcharging the customer for any credit card that comes into your establishment. And we do so that way you can avoid seeing those penalties or those fines that are associated with doing it the improper way.
Well, that makes it certainly a little bit more feasible for a funeral home or cemetery operation to implement a program like this. I think we'll get into momentarily some of the nitty-gritty of the savings and the benefits from the financial side. But as I mentioned before, this has been widely accepted as a cost of doing business. I think with COVID, we've all seen credit card processing fees, those traditional fees start to increase. And I probably don't have to talk extensively to the attendees on this webinar about the relationship between an operating expense like a credit card fee and the value of their business, which is directly related to their earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. If we can decrease an operating expense, we're going to see a proportional and equal increase to EBITDA. And for many of the attendees on our call, and if you're familiar with Johnson Consulting Group, you know that what we bring to our clients is geared in many ways towards increasing the performance and operations of your business and the enterprise value. So this, I am, all ears, Nate, in terms of seeing more about the actual how the numbers work and how we can decrease operating expenses and in turn increase our enterprise value with simple yet effective programs like a surcharge program for BelaPay.
Absolutely. Give me just a second, and I'm going to pull up an actual merchant statement analysis here that I've done for another one of our merchants, so I can show you all exactly what we're talking about here. Give me just 1 second while I get that loaded up here. It's taking a second.
Yeah.
My computer's.
Well, take your time. We did have a question that came through the chat as we were talking about surcharge, and maybe you can answer it while you look. Okay. Carlos asks, when you need to notify the card brand, are you essentially asking for permission to apply a surcharge, and can they deny the request?
Yes, as a matter of fact, they can. I've actually had that same circumstance where if it wasn't done through a specific type of surcharging platform or program, the actual process of being able to surcharge the customer was actually denied in the process of being able to do so, as it wasn't done in the proper format.
Now, a plan or a platform like BelaPay's, would you ever experience being denied a request for a surcharge program with a client that you're serving?
No, because this is actually a very recognized program that we use through our processor, that we ensure that all people that are going to be setting up with this surcharge platform, they are allowed to do so. And we make sure that that happens before they even process their first transaction. Excellent. So here I think I got this ready here. Let me share my screen here so everybody can see this merchant statement analysis that I've done. Okay, here we go. And I need to minimize this window so that way I can see everything here. Okay, so this is the merchant statement analysis that I actually did for one of our more larger businesses that are currently processing traditionally with an old program that we have, essentially doing the interchange plus pricing that everybody that's out there pretty much today still currently operates under. Now, I've kind of listed it out under every single category that's possible for them. Their current average ticket and what the average customer spends on a credit card transaction when they process their credit card. And off to the right here, if you were to have done it, they were to have done it through our actual surcharge program, this would have been the actual cost of the surcharge per that average ticket. So you can see that this has actually already been rolled in as part of the pricing at the 3.5%. If you click on any of the fields that will be populated into your merchant statement analysis, if you want one done for you, you'll notice that these fields are not, they haven't been edited to make it look better. It's actually in the proper format of what it would have been for that transaction had it been done with that average ticket, as well as all of my other forms or columns here have the same process done to them. I've gone in, I've actually pulled the actual information for the debit card charges, which you can see that are listed here in this actual Excel formula. I've gone ahead and pulled the amount of transactions that were done for each type of debit card transaction that were listed to the left, and they get charged an additional 25 cents per transaction and only 1% for debit charges. Now, on this surcharging platform, you guys don't pay for credit card charges anymore, but debit cards, like I said before, we cannot surcharge on those. So they still run traditionally, and you as a merchant still pay for them, but under a way discounted rate at only 1% and 25 cents per transaction. Now, depending on, being that we're very transparent with our pricing, depending on which model you went with, whether it be a physical terminal, which would be one that would sit on your countertop and you would run or insert the chip or slide the card or tap the service. That's our pricing for that is only $65 a month, plus your debit card price or your debit card charges. And as you can see with all of these that I've done, I've gone through and actually figured out what total physical terminal charges would have been for an entire year, what total virtual charges would have been for an entire year, as well as your total savings of what you could have seen for an entire year's worth of business and processing with this surcharge platform. The reason I've actually gone ahead and done all this and actually go through the extent of pulling all your debit card charges is because I want all businesses to see the total amount of savings they could have had month by month for each location they have, instead of just saying, hey, well, you know, your debit charges came down to this amount and you should have paid only this. But I want you to see and be able to go into your own merchant statements and be able to see where the charges are that I'm actually talking about, and be able to pull that same information and come up with the same numbers that I came up with, be able to see what your total charges could have potentially been with that service. One other thing that I add into all of these merchant statement analysis that I do is the percentage of your yearly volume that you're actually losing when it comes time to actually see the amount of savings or your operating expense for this particular service. As Vincent so kindly mentioned about operating costs, it's come to the conclusion that most businesses just see this as a must-have operating expense. And it really kind of is. I mean, people, instead of carrying cash, most times or a check, they carry a card in their wallet. I know me specifically, I don't carry cash because plastic's accepted everywhere. And so for me, if I wasn't able to run a card, I'd have to go to an ATM. And so an operating expense like this, like he said, is kind of a necessity. But why should you as a merchant or a business owner have to pay so much for something else that somebody else is being rewarded for in the end, and you lose money on your services? This also comes with, in my opinion, having to mark things up so you don't lose as much. But even in the same sense, if you mark it up, you're still losing that same percentage, but at a higher dollar amount. So it still could end up being around the same cost and loss. But for this particular merchant, they were spending, as you can see, about 2.03% of their entire year's processing volume on nothing but credit card processing fees and monthly service fees for the type of business that they run. And what we wanted to do is show them the amount of savings they could have had with this surcharge platform. And with this surcharge platform, we were able to bump that 2.03% all the way down to 0.31%. As on average, their debit usage was about 25%, leaving 75% as credit, and still saving them roughly about $75,000 a year for each monthly, $75,000 a year for their monthly service fees, instead of paying almost $90,000 of a total of a 1.72% difference.
It really is amazing. So just to clarify for all of our listeners and attendees today, what we're looking at is a merchant statement analysis that you've done. You've put pen to paper, so to speak, and done the math for a client over the course of a year, it looks like, to determine what they paid in interchange and what they would have paid with a surcharge program. And what we've found here at the bottom is 1.72% of their total processing, which, you know, is analogous, but maybe a little less than their total revenue. I mean, if we assume that most transactions are processed through credit card, you know, safely, well over 1% of annual revenue could be essentially eliminated as an operating expense. It's just astounding, really. And to frame it up in terms of funeral home or cemetery operation and business value, just to drive this point home for all of our listeners, if we're able to decrease our overall total operating expense by 1% of our annual revenue, I think conservatively that may be possible for some funeral home and cemetery operations with this program. And we conservatively use a multiple for enterprise value, I mean, we're talking about potentially being able to increase enterprise value with a program like this in the range of 4 to 5% of your annual revenue. So enterprise value being able to increase somewhere in that range. I mean, obviously we're talking generalities, but I think the exercise that you've done here, the ability to actually go through and figure out for a specific client what they're paying and what they could save, is really a tremendous value and a huge insight. Now, one of the questions that I think is on everyone's mind is, how do we continue to serve at a high level to our client families? How do we present this to our client families? How do we talk about it? And what are they going to see on their receipts? Can you talk a little bit about the effect on, let's call it, the customer's experience with this kind of program?
Absolutely. One of the biggest questions, and I think that actually is the biggest question when it comes down to people asking about a surcharge program like this, is that, well, am I going to get pushback, or I am going to get pushback, or I don't want to charge my customers? Well, and that's all in great. I definitely understand. And a lot of people that don't want to charge their customers, that particular scenario, trying to get somebody to sign up and do this particular type of program, they're looking out for more of the customer's best interest. And I really respect that, because I'm actually doing the exact same thing. Every one of you today is a potential customer of mine, and I want to see your business thrive and succeed just as much as the next. And with this particular program, you can do so. Again, like Vincent said, 1.72%, that's a lot of money. And this is all just, again, based off of their credit card processing volume. This isn't including all their cash transactions or checks or anything like that. It's just their credit card processing. So to lose a full 2% of this particular merchant did about 4.3 million. That's a lot of money lost. I mean, it's almost, $7,500 a year. And with this particular platform, it is pretty actually easily to explain to a customer. And the reason for that is, and I'm going to say this, is that no cost of running any credit card should actually be over 3.5%, which is what we actually surcharge to the customer. Most major card brands won't actually admit that, but that's why this platform and this program was actually created, was because the cost of actually accepting any credit card out there is only about 3.5% at most. And so for you as a business owner, when a customer comes to you and you're running them on a surcharge platform and they say, well, why do I have to pay for it? You tell them, look, we're only charging you 3.5%, and it is no more than the cost of actually accepting the cost of your credit card. So for you to pay for it, being that 90% of the credit cards in circulation are of some kind of reward system, you tell them, look, it just earns you a little bit more rewards, and it pays for the cost of running your credit card and allows us to do more business and services for people just like yourself, and be able to put more back into this business and help out the people that need the help when it comes time. We got a pretty big group in Texas that actually started doing this surcharge platform a little while back, and actually it was about 6 months ago. All 11 of their locations were pretty hesitant at the beginning, and pretty apprehensive of, well, people aren't going to want to pay this fee. But came to find out really fast that most people, they're going to walk in with two types of cards. One's going to be a credit card, or they'll have multiple credit cards, and the other one's going to be a debit card. But the reason they're handing you their credit card is because of the fact that they want to earn those rewards. And regardless of whatever cost the fee would have been, I mean, you probably could have bumped this fee up to 5%, and they would have been like, that's fine, just run my card. Because now they're excited, they're earning a little bit more reward. And if somebody really wants to push back and still say, well, why should I still have to pay this? Just be like, look, it's for your reward system. And the reason we charge a convenience fee is just to cover the cost of accepting and paying for more of those rewards. And really that typically puts a cap on it, and about 100% of the time. And I know that's a really bold number to state, but it really does happen that even with having to go through it again a second time and talk about the rewards, about 100% of the time I've had a process actually go through. I've only think I made out of one person out of tens of thousands of transactions so far in the 2 years I've been working for this company, not specifically this program, but the 2 years I've been working for this company, one person out of tens of thousands of transactions has actually said anything past that second time. So with that being said, I mean, it's a pretty simple platform to convey. The other thing that we do as a service to all merchants is we actually send out signage for this. So where your Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover logos go, there will be a sign for that area, as well as there's going to be one for the area of which you process the actual credit card. So that way they're aware of the service fee before they actually come up to pay for it.
It's like so many things in funeral service and in other areas of business, in that the training and how we talk about our services, our products, our processes, just the language that's used, the training of our teams becomes one of the most important factors, one of the most important areas to focus on for implementing change, such as a program like this, that in the long run can be very beneficial for the health and sustainability and the future of the funeral service operation, to be an institution in the community for the future. One follow-up question on the customer interaction a little bit, Nate, is if I'm a customer and I'm coming to the funeral home or the cemetery and I proceed with the surcharge transaction, what is the receipt going to look like?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. I've been asked that quite a few different times. Depending on what type of terminal you go with will really depend on what that looks like for you. It still varies in variance just a little bit, but the concept is the same. It doesn't really change. It's just the format, essentially, I guess is what's a better way to say that, because with a virtual terminal, they're going to get an emailed copy of the receipt, or that location can print out an 8 by 11.5 sheet of paper to show them their receipt, and like it'll have the full breakdown for them with their logo and everything else on it. But with like a typical copy of like a printer paper receipt, is they're going to show the card acceptance fee at the bottom right below the total amount that they were being charged. It'll show that card acceptance fee at 3.5% right on the receipt. It'll show the total amount for that, and then it'll show the actual total towards the bottom where how much they actually got charged for the whole transaction. And it'll be the same on that emailed copy as well, or that printable copy from the virtual terminal. It's just going to show up a little bit more bold and like, big print, because I mean, you're printing it off of an entire sheet of paper. Mm-hmm. One thing I do like to mention about the physical terminal is if your location goes with that service, it's free paper for the life of the time that you have the terminal. So there's no need to pay for $20, $30, $40 box of thermal paper anymore. Anytime you're getting close to running out, you just call up the 1-800 number that's on the terminal itself, say, hey, I need 2-3 boxes of terminal paper, and they send them out to you.
So it's very transparent with the customer in the receipt that they're getting. They're going to see it. They'll understand the surcharge program and the process, and it'll be on the receipt very clearly for them to take home.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. Thanks for some of those questions being answered. And as a reminder, if anyone has some questions as we continue on here, feel free to chime in the chat box or any other way of messaging either Nate or myself. Nate, why don't we talk a little bit about, you mentioned the virtual terminal, you mentioned the physical terminal. Can you talk a little bit about the basics of starting with BelaPay, what those fees look like? You mentioned there's not a lot of variability to it. Can you elaborate a little bit on what a potential consumer or a potential firm could expect if they decided to work with a company like BelaPay?
Absolutely. The surcharge platform itself essentially is really paying for itself when it comes down to how everybody gets paid, because out of the surcharge fees and out of the debit card fees that come from the merchant running cards is how everybody gets paid. That includes the major card brands, that includes our processor, that includes us, that includes everybody. So it's the entire breakdown is paid out of that essentially. The only thing that is really charged to the customer as far as monthly fees are concerned is here's our monthly breakdown. For a virtual terminal, it is just the monthly fees, because once the virtual terminal is set up, I mean, it's set up. We can't, there's no need to fix it. It's just, it's an online based web portal, and it's set up, and then they log in and they run credit cards, they run debit cards, they pull their reporting, and everything comes from that same site. Whereas for a physical terminal user, or somebody who would want a physical terminal on site, it's going to be our monthly fees, which is $30. And those $30 include our customer service, your merchant statement fees, your account maintenance, and your PCI compliance, all rolled into one. It only adds just the terminal fee itself. And that terminal fee is only $35 a month. Anytime I talk to somebody that's running a business that wants to know more about why we charge a terminal fee, here's what I tell them. That terminal fee is really not a terminal fee for rental. That terminal fee is more of an insurance cost for the terminal itself. Because to go out and pay for a terminal, you're going to spend anywhere upwards of $400 to $500 to $600, if not more. I mean, there's some really fancy touchscreen ones out there that are upwards of $1,000 to $1,500. I'm sure some of you guys know which ones those are. But with this service, we only charge $35 a month. And the reason for that is because anytime that something goes wrong, if our troubleshooting department can't fix it, customer service is just going to tell you, hey, send that one back. We're going to send you a new pre-programmed terminal. And once we receive that one back, you're good to go. It's just $35 a month, just like it has been. So there's no questions asked. If it's just not working properly, we're going to replace it. And we're not going to ask questions. We're not going to ask you to pay $400, $500, $600, a pop for each terminal, because we don't want to see that. We want to just see you guys succeed. And so that's the reason for the rental fee, essentially. For a physical terminal, it would be $65 a month, or $35 extra per terminal that you need. So if there's 3-4 terminals at a location, just think 3-4 times 35 plus the $30 monthly fee that's needed for our monthly statement fees and stuff like that.
Now, from a funeral home or cemetery operation perspective, to have as I would consider a known quantity or a known fixed cost for an operating expense certainly is a huge value moving into the coming month, quarter, year, and knowing what the costs are going to be for a system such as credit card processing that becomes or has become an even larger part of our business. It's been, as we've talked about, it's been a widely accepted cost of doing business. But as we continue on, and in the post-COVID world, one in which we need to look carefully and closely at the different expenses on our books and how we're doing business, and what really are those costs of doing business that we can trim or change. This one really becomes a very, very important one. And, I want to get to your offering, Nate, because I know we have a number of attendees still on the call and are listening intently. And I know that they're probably thinking about that merchant statement analysis that you showed. You are, as I understand, prepared to offer a free merchant statement analysis to any company that is currently on our webinar today. Is that right?
Yes. Anybody that wants a free merchant statement analysis done, please just feel free to, message Vince directly or your JC representative to get in touch with us. Or you can message me directly as well. I think my email will be included when the attachment to this video comes out as well. Just reach out to me and we'll get it done. The nice thing is, for me, it takes me about 15-20 minutes, depending on the statement itself, or depending on how many locations. It'll take me about 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes upwards of an hour if there's multiple locations, but I typically can have them back pretty quickly. And I'll do anywhere in the range from 4 months to an entire year's worth of processing statements to show you guys your amount of savings you could see.
That's just a tremendous offer, and I anticipate a lot of interest in that, because the clients that I work with and many JCG clients are in tune with relying on data-driven decisions, and what you're providing is the legwork to have the data to make the decision. And I think it's a real value. Obviously, every owner, every operator is going to have to make some decisions about what's going to be best for their business and serving their communities and consumers. But this is, it's a real opportunity to increase, as I've mentioned, increase the operating profit and enterprise value with some simple procedural changes to the way we operate as a business. We did have a few questions that came through the chat here. One from Cindy, just to understand, this is a platform that ensures the legal process of surcharge.
And I'd love to answer that. Absolutely, 100%. And the reason I say this is because the merchant processor that we use to actually go through this actual surcharge platform, they are on behalf of every merchant across the United States, making sure that the bans for each state individually is lifted and they are able to do it legally in each state. Kansas just recently opened up, actually as of the beginning of this month. We only have 3 states left. I think this is actually a question that Vincent was going to ask me later, but I'll get to it now. Is we only have 3 states left that cannot do this process just yet. But we are going, let me rephrase that. Our merchant processor is taking it to the Supreme Court level of each state that still doesn't have it available for them to make sure that the ban gets lifted. Most bans in each state had been a law that had been presented for about 30 plus years in each state. Most of them started back in the 80s, some even in the 70s. Michael, the states are Colorado, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. And so, no problem. The last 3 states, they are being worked on as frivolously as possible. They're always in a good mood about trying to jump on and take on more tasks to try and get all of these states on, open as possible. And it's something that we're excited for as well. Because as new states come open, more and more people can do this program. As far as the legal process, yes, for all the 47 states that are available right now, the ban has been lifted and deemed unconstitutional to merchants for surcharging. Back in 2006, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover even lifted their ban to be able to allow this to happen. And the first 14 states could immediately do it because there was no law for it. And since then, over the last 14, 15 years, it's really just kind of boomed.
You're probably reading that other question that came through from Mike O'Connell. What is the percentage charged on debit cards? Because that is the one type of card that still does receive a transactional cost, correct?
Absolutely. If you're seeing a high volume in debit card charges, it's still a better program. And here's the reason why. With debit card charges, we keep them under even what the most minimal charge would be for a credit card. And your debit card charges are only 1% plus 25 cents. So for instance, on a $10,000 funeral, that 1% and 25-cent charge on a debit card, you'd still gross $9,899.75.
One question, Nate, that is somewhat related to the legality across the states here in America. We do have some Canadian clients at JCG. I don't know if they're on our call today, but if perhaps any are, is this type of program available in the provinces of Canada? And or do you serve traditional processing for those provinces if not?
Yeah, we can still do traditional processing in the provinces of Canada. Unfortunately, the surcharging platform has not been allowed in the state of Canada as of just yet. I know they are, again, frivolously working on everywhere that could possibly be associated with our card processing services, and they really want to make sure that everybody has a chance and has the availability to do so. From my understanding, for the difference in change or rate exchange of currency is really the only big issue that they're trying to adjust for our merchant processor, and then they'll be able to fight back against their providence level, I guess. I'm not sure how their law specifically works, but be able to fight back against that and make it essentially unconstitutional for merchants up there to do it too.
Well, thank you. There was another question that came through from Paul. This is a good one. I know that many funeral home and cemetery operations use a point of sale system. We're familiar with some of the big ones in the funeral service profession or industry, but does the terminal, whether virtual or physical, does it integrate well with point of sale systems?
So for that, it's a little bit more complex. We do have a full integration team. As far as my understanding, there's not a way to fully integrate it yet with a POS system. And by fully, I mean, you'd still have to type in the information on the terminal itself instead of having it just send the message to the terminal to have it uploaded directly. But yes and no is the answer to that question, essentially, because yes, it can still be used with a point of sale system. No, will it integrate and fully download the information that's being sent to it? It will not. Not yet, I should say. They are working on something that actually will. Their development team is constantly in working on new technology, new stuff, and putting new stuff together for this surcharge platform to try and make everything better and really kind of be there to focus on everything.
All right, we have some more questions coming through. This is excellent. This one asks, where does the surcharging notice information need to be placed? Whether it's the general price list on funeral homes general price list or on our contract. Do you have information on that, Nate? You're serving a funeral home client. I know perhaps several. What have they had to do on their pricing or contracts when it comes to notification?
Absolutely. For a lot of the places that I'm currently working with in the state of New York, they typically have one of two things, if not both, and that is a general pricing list as well as essentially an itemized breakdown of what their entire transaction is going to be at the end. Now, I'm glad he asked for the state of New York, because the state of New York and Maine do have one major stipulation that they do have to let their customers know about when they are doing a surcharge, and that is the difference in price between debit, cash, and check transactions versus credit. So it really boils down to where you want to have it listed, whether you'd rather have it listed on your itemized breakdown or whether you'd rather have it listed on your general pricing list. But somewhere needs to show just the difference between cash, debit, and check versus credit. And as long as you show that in the state of New York, you're good to go.
That's very helpful. And I imagine that every state, there are some different processes, legal requirements for this program, but BelaPay, I'm sure, is familiar with all of those state laws and can assist any client in their implementation.
Michael, absolutely. We will provide the wording. If you would like, I can give me just a second and I'll go get the exact wording. So that way you can know where it needs to be placed, as well as on the signage that we actually provide you. It'll actually tell you, it'll explain to the customer how the process works. Whether, for credit cards, we charge a 3.5% convenience fee. For debit cards, it's no more than the cost of actually accepting the credit card. We will take care of that fee. That's what the sign actually says. And for Vincent, what you were saying earlier about the laws for each specific state in general, New York and Maine are the only two in the entire United States so far that actually have a stipulation that they have to present the credit card versus what type of other payments are available for their state. Every other state, you just need to have the right signage that we provide, and then making sure you notify the major card brands you're doing this. And then we run you through our program and you're good to go.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. I know that as I've learned about BelaPay and about surcharge programs, in conjunction with the frequency of funeral home and cemetery financial statements that I see, I recognize it as a big opportunity, one that needs to be looked at carefully and considered, especially for the future of our profession. And how we approach and think about the cost of doing business. Nate, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our group today? I know that this merchant statement analysis, such a valuable tool that you're offering to all attendees. Again, we're going to be sending out the recording of this webinar to all attendees early next week. And if you, as an attendee, would like a merchant statement analysis, reach out to me individually or respond to the recording you'll receive. And we'll get you set up with Nate, and he can put that pen to paper, do the math, and provide you really with the data you need in order to make a good decision for your business. But Nate, can I turn it back to you for any final comments, questions, or concerns on your end before we wrap things up today?
Absolutely. Actually, I really wanted to address the question that Michael just put in the chat, as it's a very
I think, Nate, we're perhaps losing you. We're having a difficult connection right now. It looks like Mike had asked about if the customer presents a debit card, but it does not put their PIN, is it considered a credit card? That's a great question. I know that Nate probably has the answer. It could.
PIN debit versus.
Nate,
did I lose you guys? Did I come back?
Yeah, I was just repeating the question that Michael had said in the chat, but if you want to start from the beginning there, we can hear you now.
Did I come back now?
Yeah, I can hear you if you want to give it a try.
Yeah, sorry about that. So to answer Michael's question, if the customer presents a debit card and does not enter their PIN number, no, it is not considered a credit card transaction. Most merchant processing companies out there will run it through the credit network because, again, they make more. And through the debit network, they make less. And with us, the terminal that we use, whether it be the physical or the virtual terminal, it will recognize each card individually as what it's supposed to be and run it through the appropriate network to be charged the right way.
Great question and another great answer. A lot to learn here when it comes to the intricacies of credit card processing, surcharge, and other programs like this.
Absolutely. It's been a very big learning experience since this surcharge platform came out. But I've enjoyed every moment of learning about it and really presenting it to whoever is got a moment to listen, because I know it can save any business money that's out there.
Yeah, we've seen it in the merchant statement analyses that you've done. And again, for our attendees, feel free to reach out next week or before to myself or your representative at Johnson Consulting. We'll get you set up with Nate. Nate, I want to thank you again for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to bring Johnson Consulting Group clients valuable resources. The information and expertise that you've shared with us today. A big thanks to you. And thanks to everyone on the call today. We know your time's valuable. We appreciate you sharing it with us. If you're interested in learning more about BelaPay or receiving your free merchant statement analysis, please feel free to reach out. And until next time, take care and be well.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. Appreciate your time.